Our today's topic is how do we conserve biodiversity? Conservation of biodiversity. Our ecosystem is undergoing change due to pollution, invasive species, overexploitation by humans, and climatic changes. Now, why there is a need of conserving biodiversity, or what is man's role in the conservation of biodiversity? Let us see. We have our normal duty to look after our planet and pass it on to our future generations in good health. We should not deprive future generations from economic and aesthetic benefits that we get from biodiversity. Most effective mechanism for conserving biodiversity is to prevent further destruction. We need more knowledge to conserve biodiversity in reduced space and under increased pressure of human activities. There are two basic strategies of biodiversity conservation, that is, in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation involves sacred plants, home gardens, seed banks, field gene banks, cryopreservation, botanical gardens, zoological gardens, and aquaria. Whereas in situ conservation, it involves protected area network, which are further divided into sacred forest or groves, sacred lakes, biosphere reserves, which can be terrestrial and marine, national parks, and wildlife sanctuaries. In situ conservation strategies, they lay emphasis on protection of total ecosystem, and it concludes protection of a group of typical ecosystem. What are protected areas? These are the areas of land and sea which are specially dedicated to protection and maintenance of biological diversity, and these areas are managed through legal means. Example of the protected areas are the Yellowstone National Park in USA and the Royal National Park in Australia near Sydney. Many similar areas throughout the world. Now they protect the rare species. World Conservation Monitoring Center has recognized 37,000 protected areas around the world, and as of September 2002, India has 581 protected areas, which includes 89 national parks and 492 wildlife sanctuaries. These national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, they cover 4.7% of land surface, and it is only 4.7%, which should be 10% according to international suggested norms. The first national park which was established in India was Jim Corbett National Park. What are the main benefits from protected areas? Number one, it maintains all important populations of Indian species. It maintains number and distribution of communities and habitats. It conserves genetic diversity of all present species, and it prevents introduction of foreign species. Next comes the national parks. A national park is a land reserved which is reserved and maintained by national government for welfare of entire wildlife in it. Operations such as plantation, cultivation and grazing, they are not allowed in the national parks. Private ownership rights and habitat manipulation, they are also not permitted. There are at present 89 national parks in India, which cover 1% of India's total area. Now, wildlife sanctuary. A sanctuary is an area which is reserved for conservation of animals only. Operations such as obtaining timber, minor forest products, and private ownership rights, they are allowed in wildlife sanctuaries provided they do not affect the animals. And there are at present 492 wildlife sanctuaries that cover 3.7% of India's total area. Biosphere reserves. It is a specified area in which multiple use of land is permitted by dividing it into zones, each for a particular activity. Concept of biosphere reserve was launched in 1975 as a UNESCO Man and Biosphere program, that is, and this program deals with conservation of ecosystem and genetic resources contained therein. Till May 2002, there were 425 biosphere reserves which were located in 94 countries. In India, there are 13 biosphere reserves, and the examples are Nanda Devi, Manas, Sundarbans, Gulf of Mannar, Nilgiri, Great Nicobar, Simplipal, Pachmadi, Nokrek, Dibru, Dehang Debang, Agastya Malai, and Khang Hen Zonga. A biosphere consists of three zones: core zone, buffer zone, and the transition zone. The core zone is the central region which is undisturbed and really protected ecosystem. Buffer zone is the middle zone, which is a zone of limited human activity, and it surrounds the core zone area and it manages the source used as strategies for research and educational activity. Transition zone is the outermost part of biosphere reserve. This is the area of culture and cooperation between resource management and local people. Activities like settlement, cropping, forestry, recreation, and other uses, they continue from this transition zone. What are the main functions of biosphere reserves? Conservation of genetic resources, conservation of species, conservation of ecosystem, traditional resources, and landscapes, etc. These also help in development, various type of development, that is social, cultural, economic, and ecological development. Scientific research, monitoring, education, and information technology. This means the biosphere reserves, they act as a center of scientific research, monitoring. They are the source of education and they provide various information.